Hello, folks. I'm Bob Schneider. I thought I missed this meeting, and then I found out that no, I was an hour off in my timing.
Well, lucky us, you're here.
It's nice to see everybody.
We can't quite see you, but we can see your name.
How come? Oh, let me think. I can fix that. You might not want to, but there you go. Let me get a little more light.
Now, just a fair warning to Joanne and Deb and all, I've had internet problems. So, you know, if I start to have them and I freeze up, you guys take it on. But we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Yeah. This is a nice time to catch up with the folks in Lake County.
Hmm.
How you doing there, Bob?
Is that Frank? Hey, Frank,
Yep.
How are you? Nice to see you. I just got on to
I think because I'm screen sharing, I can only see about 4 people, but I can't see you. But
Yeah, you
Good to have
see
you
the
here.
up and down arrows on the right will allow you to scroll through the people that are on Zoom. And then we typically have a number of people that join us on Facebook Live as well. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live,
Denise Rush.
yeah, whoever that is. That was Donna. Anyway, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, I believe you can ask your questions in the chat there. Is that right, Joanne? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Do you guys get
That's
much
okay,
rain
I
up
just
there?
had to unmute. So yes, yeah, you should be able to post your questions in the chat and hopefully we can get those to Frank and Hinda readily for you.
Okay. So Joanne, before we get started, do you have any instructions for folks on Facebook or on Zoom that you'd like them to know before we get going?
Well, just an invitation if you're here on Zoom with us to go ahead and mute your mic during the presentation. We will open up for questions afterwards, but in the meantime, if you could mute your mic, and if it isn't muted, I may do that from our end. So, and if you have questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat. We'll be monitoring those throughout the evening. And of course, if you're on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comment section and we'll try to get those to Frank and Hinda.
Great. Well, it's top of the hour, so let's get started. My name is Denise Brushing. I'm chair of the Sierra Club Lake Group. And we're pleased in this membership meeting, general membership meeting, to have with us both Frank Aebly and Hinda Darner from Frank is the district ranger for the, oh, I hear some noise going on there. Frank is the district ranger for Covelo and Upper Lake Ranger districts in the Mendocino National Forest, and Hinda is the fuels officer for Covelo and Upper Lake Ranger districts in the Mendocino National Forest. And the topic today is the Mendocino Complex Ranch Fire 2018 Fire Recovery Update. So with that, I will turn it over to Frank. And like as Joanne said, hold your questions and we'll open up for questions at the end. Thanks, everybody. Frank, it's yours.
All right. Thanks, Denise. Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday evening. I'm Frank Aebly, as Denise said, the district ranger for Upper Lake and Covelo, or sometimes I do Covelo and Upper Lake. I've got a couple of districts I need to take care of on the Mendocino National Forest. Just a little bit of background about me for you. I came to the Mendocino National Forest in 2008. That was my first Forest Service job, and I was the district hydrologist. And I left in about 2010. I went to the Sierra National Forest as a forest hydrologist. Came back about 11 months later as a ecosystem manager for the district. And then for the last 5 or 6 years, I think I've been the district ranger. And so really pleased to be here and thank you all for attending this. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Hinda to give herself a little introduction and what her background is.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Hinda Darner. I'm the fuels officer for Covelo and Upper Lake Ranger districts. And I was born and raised here in Lake County. So the Mendocino National Forest has been my backyard ever since I was just a little girl. And I started my career with the Forest Service on the hand crew in wildland fire suppression. Spent 6 or 7 years doing that, and then I moved over into fuels management as a fuels technician, and then worked my way up into the fuels officer position. So that's my background here, and I'm happy to be here and excited to talk with everyone. Thanks.
All right, and some of you may have noticed my accent already. Yes, I'm from New York, the East Coast, and because probably only about a minute after I start talking, people probably start to wonder where I'm from. So I just want to throw that out there. So we'll just go ahead and get started. We're going to talk a little bit about the ranch fire and what we've been doing since 2018. It seems a little bit odd since we've had the August complex since then, which is, you know, a much huger, bigger fire. But you know, the ranch fire is really the one that has affected Lake County and the Mendocino complex, you know, with the river fire as well. So just a little outline. We're going to go just a little bit of a ranch fire overview. I'm sure none of us really forget, but we'll set some of the stage and some of the background for what we're going to talk about a little later, and what we've been doing, suppression repair since the fire, some of the BEAR work, and that stands for Burned Area Emergency Response. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the long-term restoration going on in the fire footprint, specifically the Northshore area. And we have the Northshore Restoration Project that we are in the middle of planning and hopefully be implementing in the future. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the partnerships and research opportunities that have come up after the ranch fire, which has been really exciting. So the ranch fire started in July 2018, did not get contained until September, burned over 400,000 acres, little under 300,000 of that on the Mendocino National Forest. And that was pretty much the entire Upper Lake Ranger District, with just a little bit up there in Pillsbury area that didn't burn, which thankfully didn't burn during the August complex either. We kind of saved that Pillsbury area as well. We don't have to deal with just the acres that burned, but we also had to deal with the 300 miles of dozer and hand line that were put in during the fire. And this picture is just the parking lot of the Upper Lake Ranger District as I came back, as I tried to head home the day it was coming down, and got turned around during the evacuations that we all remember. And I had to go back to the Ranger District because I couldn't get home. And this is what I came back to. And it's pretty scary, as we all know. Just a little context for the Clear Lake Basin. Approximately 98,000 acres of the basin was within the fire perimeter. And that includes not just the ranch fire, which is this one here. I don't know if you can all see my cursor, but also of course, the river fire that was down here that was part of the complex. So fairly large portion of the Clear Lake Basin that burned in 2018. This is a fire progression map. And what this shows is what areas burned on certain days and how fast it moved through the fire footprint. And the reason I put this up here is it's important to note that the Clear Lake Basin and the project area that we'll be talking about over here in Northshore, this is that blue and light blue color that burned in probably about 3 days' time after the fire started. So it started back over here by the Buffalo Ranch, and within days, it was over here across almost to the Grindstone district of the Mendocino National Forest. The fire progressed northwards and started chunking. So as you see the greens and the yellows and the reds, that means those are days, and it started moving slowly to the north. But the real key is that what happened in those first couple of days around this area, as well as the river fire, that burned within, very few days, a large amount of area. And when we're talking about our restoration efforts, this is the type of thing we just don't want to see happen again. This is a map of what we call the RAV-G data, and I'll be honest, I forget what it stands for, but basically what it is it shows mortality. I won't get into basal area loss. That's basically the area of a certain tree is basal area. But what it shows is if you look at the red here in the Northshore area, that is 90% or more mortality. So 90% or more of the vegetation was killed in that fire. And you can see 90% of the vegetation in a large portion of the fire was killed. And ignore the river fire down here. We didn't map that. That's just an artifact of the satellite imagery. And as you see, as the fire marched north, we had a lot more of a mosaic burn with different patches of high mortality and low mortality. But really what we saw over here was just an incredible amount of fire-killed trees. And I'll show a few pictures of that here. So this is looking up the East Fork of Middle Creek. If you can see my cursor, this is Elk Mountain Road coming up from the campground, going up towards the Deer Valley and Petty Pines area. And this is East Fork of Middle Creek. And you can see, this is just pretty much post-fire within the first year, an incredible amount of mortality. But this is what we expect in some of these lower slopes. These are all brush, chaparral, oak, woodland areas. They burn hot. They don't burn at low severity very often. Brush burns in only one way. But you also see a lot of the oaks that are just brown. They were killed as well. Another view looking down into Long Valley before and after the fire. And what you can see after the fire is, again, a lot of high mortality, but a lot of these little green stringers of trees that survived. And that becomes really important when we talk about what we're going to do in the future in this area. So what have we been doing? We started with suppression repair. That's been done. And I'll just show a few pictures of that. The burn area emergency response, that's been done. Hazard tree removal, the fire injured and killed trees along the roads and along our campgrounds. We've been doing that. It's ongoing. It's going to take a very long time actually to get them all taken care of. The other thing we do is salvage sales, which means that we try to sell off the commercial sized trees before they lose their value. They lose their value for saw logs within about 2 years because of the bugs move in and the wood within the tree becomes unusable for creating lumber. And then we look at long-term restoration efforts, which we'll talk about with the Northshore Project. So in suppression repair, we look at dozer lines and hand lines. We had about 300 miles of that in the ranch fire, which sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to the August fire, we had 300 miles or more of dozer line alone, not to mention hand lines. So it's a lot, but it's not as much as we had to deal with the August complex. We do some road grading. The roads get beat up with all the engines and buggies going up and down, water tenders going up and down roads all day. So we regrade the roads, we improve the drainage, and then areas where we have to go down into rivers and draft water, we do that kind of site repair. And then seeding of some areas that were either cleared of vegetation for a safety zone or dozer lines, and of course garbage removal. And you can see here that this picture is just showing on the left. That's a bunch of our Elk Mountain hotshots out there, hand seeding. They did a lot of hand seeding after the ranch fire. Those folks were just really great doing that for us. It's hard work. And on the right side is a dozer line where you can see there's been a bunch of vegetation pulled back over onto the dozer line to try and prevent erosion and invasive weed treatment. And I bring this picture up because it's kind of one of my favorite dozer line repair pictures. You've got 4 excavators there, and they're working really hard, just trying to bring all that wood back up onto that dozer line to prevent erosion and water quality impacts. And of course, the more you cover that bare soil, the less invasive weeds you have. So that's kind of the suppression repair part. I'm going to go through the bare issue pretty quickly. Just this is the process. What they do is they look at the soil burn severity. They go out there and they map how bad the soil was burned. They identify different levels, low, moderate, and high. Moderate and high being the worst, of course, and that means that in a moderate to high burn severity for a soil, you've lost all your root structure, you've lost all of your organic material in the top layers of the soil, and sometimes you have what's called a hydrophobic reaction, where rainfall on a high burn soil doesn't percolate into the soil like it normally does, it just runs right off, and that causes, of course, flooding and debris flows and a lot of erosion. And so they identify the watershed response based on that burn severity. They look at flood sources, erosion, geologic hazards, and then they compare that to what our risks are on National Forest Service lands. And then they assess those risks and they develop treatments to manage them. And manage is the key, because we can't mitigate or remove that risk completely with treatments. All we can do is try to manage them. And when I say that, I mean sometimes we can't do a treatment to prevent erosion and debris flows. What we do is sometimes we close the area so that nobody gets hurt. And so that's what I mean by manage the risk. And so this is the soil burn severity for the ranch fire. And I just want to key you in to here in our project area and the Clear Lake Basin. And I hope you can see this card. The yellows and reds are the moderate to high burn severity. And there is a significant amount of moderate to high burn severity of the soil in this area. And so that was one of the things we took into account when we decided what are we going to do for fire recovery in this fire footprint. Where are we going to go for our first project? And this was one of the reasons we chose the area above the towns of Nice and Lucerne, among others. Just a quick modeled response rivers, looking at the peak storm flow and flow in the rivers. They did not see a whole lot of, or expected a whole lot of increase. The blue is the pre-fire, the red is the post-fire. And you see they didn't really expect a whole lot of increase, except for over here, the Bartlett Bridge. That's out in the eastern part of the North Shore project area. But we did not see any real increased response in the flows during the following 2 years, which validates this modeling and the treatments that we did. The other thing they looked at was the debris flow probability, and the red is the really concerning areas, the reds and the yellows. You're looking at 60 to 100% probability of debris flows, rocks, soil, vegetation, all coming down in one big mass that's very dangerous. Fortunately, we did not see the response that was modeled. We were really concerned about the areas in the this area over here, which is the Spring Valley area over there, and over here. but we did not see that response, thankfully. And that might have been because we didn't get the rainfall that was used to model this. It might have been because we overestimated the hazard, but it's always better to overestimate than underestimate. And one of the things we did to mitigate this probability and this hazard was basically just public outreach. Let those property owners know, hey, you've got a serious, possibility of having these debris flows coming down in your backyard. So moving on to the next step, hazard tree abatement. This has been a ongoing project basically along roads, trails, and in campgrounds. We prioritized the roads first. We had over 250 miles of roads in the ranch fire footprint that had significant amounts of dead and dying trees that would be coming down over the road that we needed to take care of. So we put together a project. It was called the Ranch Fire Hazard Tree Abatement. There was actually several projects with different names. The one in the Bartlett area is called the Bartlett Project. And what we did is within 1.5 times the tree height, or up to 200 feet from a road, we wanted to remove anything that was dead or that had a 50% probability of dying within a year. We did this with a combination of commercial sales that included some stewardship contracting. The commercial aspect of these operations, the mills really only want trees that are greater than 14 inches in diameter breast height. And that's basically exactly what it sounds like. If you walk up to a tree and you wanted to throw a tape measure around it, you throw it at your height of your breast because that's where you can reach, and that's where you measure your diameter. So it's once it gets smaller than that, they're really not interested in it. But by the sale of those trees, we can get them to actually take the smaller ones and maybe move them to a biomass market or dispose of them into a chip or a particle board process. A lot of these did not get done. One of the ways we're also trying to treat the hazard trees is through a CAL FIRE prevention grant with Clear Lake Environmental Research Center, which I'll talk about a little later. We were able to get over $800,000 to remove some of those smaller diameter hazard trees along the roads, which are really important in the Bartlett area because we have a lot of private property in there, and we need people to be able to get in and out of that property without having to worry about trees coming down across the road or on their car, God forbid. This project was litigated by Epic Environmental, and the Forest Service lost. And I won't go into the details. We used a category of environmental analysis that they didn't care for, so they litigated us. And the judges ruled against us. All right, maybe I'll get into a little bit of detail. The judges ruled against us not because of the category of the environmental analysis we used, but they couldn't fathom why a tree 1.5 times, 1.5 tree height from a road would actually impact the road. They thought they just could not get past the fact that if the road is further from if the tree is further from the road than it's high, why would it impact the road? And if you're a forester, if you've seen a tree fall, you know that it throws all kinds of things ahead of it. So, but they couldn't get past that. Nonetheless, we did 70% of the project completed before the commercial purchasers pulled it out. And so we did get a lot of good work done. I'll show a few pictures of that here. Oh, before my pictures. So this is the prioritization of the roads within the ranch fire footprint. We prioritized the main roads and the county roads. They're county roads, but we have the responsibility of maintaining the vegetation outside those roads that might fall on those roads. Roads that access private properties, and roads that we use to go for projects or for monitoring watershed or range or other administrative uses. And if you look at the size of the fire and the small size of the roads, it's really not a lot, but one of the most important things you can do post-fire. So here's a couple of pictures. On the left, you can see a lot of standing dead. This is the M1 road that leads to Pillsbury. You can see there's been a couple of trees that have been cut during the operation and waiting to be brought to a deck. And you can see that a lot of the smaller trees are still there. Those are ones that we're going to have to deal with after the commercial operation pulls out. On the right-hand side, it's an area just down the road. You can see the results of the commercial operation, where you have a lot less standing dead, a lot less hazards, and a lot less trees that might impact the road. Here's another slide. This is just showing the operation up there on M1 on the left here. This is called a fellow buncher. They basically just reach in. At the head of that excavator is a saw and a grapple. And so it cuts the tree and it grabs it and pulls it to a deck. And on the right side is one of the units that were kind of finished up. And I think I put this here to demonstrate the fact that even after they're done, we still have a lot of hazard trees that need to be removed. And also, if you look at that big tree there, it looks like almost looks like a sequoia cactus. That's a beautiful wildlife snag. And of course, that was left for wildlife. It's along the road. It may become an issue in the future, but you know, we in this kind of operation, we really don't want to take those wildlife trees down. You know, if we don't have to, and we'll deal with it when and if it comes across the road. And just to provide a little contrast, this is in the Northshore project area. This is an untreated road that did not get, they did not have a chance to complete. And you can see just a lot of high mortality, a lot of dead trees along the road that Hinda is going to have to deal with somehow with her fuels folks and her fuels contracts. And we're not exactly sure how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it with all of our partners. So I don't know, Denise, I know that we were keeping questions towards the end, but if there were any questions before we go into this about those previous topics, I'd be fine to entertain them now.
Yes, so folks, you can either raise your hand by, if you go down to the bottom and look at, there's a button down there that says reactions. It gives you an opportunity to raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can type a question into the chat if you're on Zoom. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and type your question into the, into the chat in Facebook. So we're monitoring both places. So let's see if anybody's raising their hand at this point.
Yeah, it might be easier just if anybody's raising their hand.
There is a question in the chat from Magdalena. Frank mentioned outreach to the local owners regarding debris and storm flows. How was that outreach accomplished?
We had several public meetings and news releases. We did not go, door to door or anything like that, but we did, we alerted the local authorities. We had public meetings and we had press releases.
Okay, great. We have a question from Deb Sally. So Deb, if you can unmute yourself.
I was just wondering what the hand seeding, what are they seeding out there?
They're seeding native grasses and forbs. I can't tell you what the exact species are because I'm not a botanist, but yeah, our botanist had ordered thousands for that fire of native grass and forb seeds for our crews to go out there and spread around.
Thank you. And so they just spread them. There's nothing, and just hope that they take root and things happen that it works for them, right? They're not covering again.
And they spread them and they monitor the areas for about 3 to 4 years is what we get funding for.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you, Frank. Now that I guess the saleability of the remaining trees it's just not there. Are you using those trees to stop erosion? What's happening to those trees, as the hazard trees I'm talking about along the roads that you weren't able to get to sell?
Right now, we've been basically falling them and bucking them up and piling them. There are areas, especially along our off-highway vehicle trails, where we do fall them along the contour to try and prevent erosion. But there's too many of them out there to just use for erosion control, because and I'll show some pictures later that you can fall one or two of them, maybe 10 of them in an acre to prevent erosion control. But when you have 200 to 300 trees per acre, just falling them to prevent erosion really just creates a big fuels problem.
Okay, I'm looking to see if we have any other.
Paul put a question into the chat. Are the deciduous oaks dead when the brown leaves cling rather than fall through the winter?
Yeah, how do you know the oaks are dead?
Well, they will sprout. I mean, they're just. If I said dead, I made a mistake. Most oaks will sprout back again, unless they've been severely burned in their roots. But the picture I showed with the brown oaks, that was browning from heat, intense heat. That wasn't a fall picture when they were just like going in dormant and turning brown. And actually, oak regeneration in the post-fire environment is something we'll go into with the Northshore project. It's really actually key to one of the things we're doing, is how do we assist those oaks to regenerate, because they will sprout, they come back kind of bushy. And one of the things that we look to do is we kind of prune them and train them to become more of that single stem, 2 to 3 stem, taller oak that provides some of the shade and the habitat.
So another question in chat from Kimberly. Hello, Frank and Hinda. Thank you for presenting tonight. The Ranch Fire BAER states that there were 672 miles of dozer line repaired. Was that a mistake? And also, do you know the total of dozer line put in during the August complex? Thanks.
I don't have the number for the August complex in front of me, and I might have made a mistake about whether those 300 miles was just dozer line or hand line. The BAER report itself is the most accurate for sure.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything coming in from Facebook, so.
Okay, are there any other questions that we could unmute folks or you have more to present at this point, Frank, or you?
Yeah, I'd like to go into the Northshore project now real quick.
Excellent. Okay,
So
let's
we
do that.
entertain more questions. So the Northshore Restoration Project, we're doing an environmental assessment for. A lot of things we had to consider: climate change, what was the probability of natural regeneration, where was the habitat lost, what kind of habitat was lost, what kind of habitat can we expect in the future given climate change, for example. We have to look at the fuel loading, of course, and potential for reburn. And then in areas where we were planting trees, we consider not the traditional planting scheme where we went out there and planted several hundred trees per acre, expecting to be able to go in there and thin them continuously to get an appropriately stocked forest. And that plays into, what are we going to leave for our future generations? So we had to come up with some very unique planting designs, which I don't have the details here tonight. They're in the EA though, to allow us to, plant the forest that we want. and not the forest that we need to manage to get to where we want. That's what we used to do. We used to plant the forest and then assume we're going to manage it for the next 50 years or to get it to where we want it to be. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to plant the forest that we want it to be right away, so that we don't have to put all that work into it in the future, because we all know our funding goes down or stays flat. We don't see any indications our funding is going to go up in the future years. So there's a lot of things to consider about this project. So the project details themselves, it's a 40,000 acre project area focused along to the east of the towns of Nice and Lucerne and Glen Haven and Clear Lake Oaks. There was, I think this number for salvage might have been changed since I did this slide, but nonetheless, when I mentioned earlier was salvage, you pretty much lose the value of those logs for salvage about 2 years after a fire. So we're looking at 3 to 4 years out now by the time this decision gets signed. So those 580 acres of salvage are probably not, they're probably not going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a mill in California that's going to want to buy 3 to 4 year old fire burned trees. There's just nothing for them. So hopefully we can get some biomass interest to take those forests. Approximately 2,700 acres of reforestation. And then of course, we're looking at herbicide use for release treatments and invasives. And for those of you who don't know, release treatments means when we go and plant a plantation, we typically go in there, or we used to go in there, commonly go in there with herbicides to try and knock down the brush so that they don't outcompete the seedlings, the conifer seedlings, because brush grows very fast and conifer seedlings do not. And so we're looking at the possibility of using that for, that's what's called release treatments. And of course, there's a lot of invasives along roadsides and where dozer lines were put in. Most of the areas where dozer lines were put in, we tried to treat in the suppression repair phase. We didn't use herbicides, but we went out there and tried to, that's one of the goals of seeding, is try and get those native grasses growing and get them up and outcompete the invasives.
Frank just froze. Hinda, maybe you take it from here.
Hold on, I'm gonna let him know that he froze. He has the PowerPoint. And it's just about to be switched. Hold on. It looks like we just lost his PowerPoint. I'm sure he'll be
He's
back on.
coming back.
Hello, am I back again?
Yes, you're
You're
back.
back in.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed you were,
Glad
you noticed you disconnected. You froze there for a second.
Okay. And I'm guessing my PowerPoint left as well, so I have to
Yes.
reshare that. Okay. Let's see. Why did this go back? So bear with me while I try to, there we go. All right, so the purpose and need for the project, reduce fuel loads. You know, we have a lot of standing debt out there. It's going to come down at some point. We want to provide, of course, for soil cover, even if as we reduce those fuel loads. We want to continue to remove the hazard trees along the road systems. Recover like as I mentioned, originally we wanted to recover the economic value of some of that larger trees, but that's probably not going to be an option. And it's really, and when you think about it, it's not really just recovering the economic value, but now that we can't, or most likely can't sell those larger trees, we're going to have to pay somehow do something with them. And in some places that's not an issue. In other places, it's going to be a larger issue. We want the landscape to come back in an appropriate configuration of tree species, spacing, etc. We want to make sure that the habitat that's left there and the habitat that comes back is appropriate for the environment and the geography that's there, taking into account climate change, as well as the elevation aspect, etc. Try and take care of noxious weeds. And then another part of this project is we've been asked by several community schools and people in the tribes post-fire, what can we do to help? What are you guys going to do out there? What can we do to help you? And so we've designed this project. One of the things I mentioned was kind of that oak regeneration and pruning and that type of thing. And that's a great thing to get school kids out there. They can prune the oak leaves. They can get the bushy oaks to get into a single 2-3 stem oak a lot quicker than it'll happen naturally. Great thing for some of the tribes maybe to do is to grow some oaks, bring them out there, help us plant them in areas. So that was built into this as well. So the fuel reduction. So here is 2 years after the fire. You can see that we've got quite a lot of the small diameter. This is probably about 12-inch DBH that I mentioned, diameter breast height trees out there. This is the majority of what we have to look at in the North Shore area. I mean, going back to the project size of 40,000 acres, and what we thought might have been a salvage component was only 580 acres. This is the majority of what we have to look at out here, is this very thick, small diameter mortality that's going to pose some issues in the future. They come down much faster than the larger diameter. Here's another picture, just illustrating. This is again 2 years after. We can estimate that what we use is what's called a tons per acre fuel loading. Somewhere around here is about 50 tons per acre fuel loading, just in what's down on the ground right now. Now, if you can imagine what you see, all the dead trees around that, once they continue to come down, that fuel loading is going to go much higher. And so there's definitely a need to take care of this situation. In the event of another fire, I say imagine the soil pit under your fire pit. This soil has already been burned at high severity. This was a high severity soil burn. If all this comes down and it burns again, you're basically looking at what it looks like when you remove your fire pit. And there's pretty much nothing there. Something might grow in the future. First, the invasives will come back, of course, but it's going to take a long time for vegetation to grow once you burn this soil again under this fuel loading. These are some modeled projections of what the fuel loading might be. I know it's very hard to read, but hopefully you can see my cursor. This green line at the top is basically if we do nothing. The y-axis here is 0 tons per acre up to about 200 tons per acre at the very top here. And the x-axis is 20-year increments. So these graphs go from 2020 to 2100. The green line is if we do nothing. The fuel loading will increase to over 200, close to 200 tons per acre, and slowly decline into the future. These areas here, these curves in the middle, these are modeled with a diameter limit. We have an alternative that we're looking at that says that we don't we won't remove any trees that are greater than a certain diameter limit. And this is that alternative there. And so you can see this continues to climb to about 100 tons per acre and then slowly trails off to 2,100. Our proposed action is somewhere right in the middle of here, which is about 25 tons per acre, and a little higher than what I said the ideal was, but that ideal is for fuel loading and fuels. You want to increase that a little bit for wildlife and for soil soil cycling, nutrient cycling, and soil protection. So 25 ton per acre, somewhere around that that compromise between fuel loading and wildlife and soils. The reason there's a lot of curves on here is this is a research plot from the Pacific Northwest Research Station. And what he had to do is he was running a whole bunch of scenarios of different silvicultural prescriptions, different thinning scenarios, but just showing basically that, you know, this is the no action, one of alternatives at diameter limit, and then in somewhere in here, I forget which one it is, but somewhere in here is our proposed action. So looking at another one of the purpose needs, looking at the vegetated landscape. Again, looking at the pattern, spacing, and species. This is a map very unique to the Northshore project. This is one of the first times that this has been used. This is a model developed by our Region 5 ecosystem and ecology group. And what it shows is the probability of natural regeneration within a year, I think it is, of seedlings. And the green areas are 80 to 10% probability. And as you go down to the lower areas, the browns and yellows, you have a less probability of natural regeneration. And this takes into account climate, climate change, slope, aspect, etc. So this is one of the tools that we're using to determine where we should plant, not only where is it unlikely that we'll have natural regeneration, but also kind of gives us a little hint into where it is that we might have a successful planting operation. There is natural regeneration going out there for sure. This is a nice little ponderosa seedling coming up here. But one of the things I would like to just kind of show is I'll zoom out here a little bit. And that's what it looks like in that area. You can see a little seedlings down in here. And the point here that I'd like to make is that there's a lot of folks that think that we can just kind of put prescribed fire through these areas and take care of these fine fuels and medium fuels and call it and be able to manage it that way. But this natural regeneration, if we put fire through there right now, it would kill those little seedlings. So there's definitely a need in those areas that do naturally regenerate for some kind of manual or mechanical fuel reduction, whether that's going in there chainsaws and cutting and piling and burning, or whether it's going in there with a masticator and masticating and chipping up these trees so that they don't come down and prevent these seedlings from thriving. So our proposed action with the Northshore. This is a map of the proposed action. The kind of bluish teal colors are our reforestation areas. These are areas that were identified as places where there's very unlikely natural regeneration. Also identified as areas where we would have success in replanting. So they're kind of like the higher elevations, the moister drainages, the northern slopes, areas where we could probably maintain an actual forest. As climate change, hits us, and it has been hitting us in this southern area of the forest, there's probably some of these areas that were forested in the past that are not gonna, they're not gonna maintain forests anymore. They're gonna turn to oaklands, shrublands, and grasslands. So these areas were picked based on, the climate change scenario, the probability of regeneration, and of course the aspect and slope. Now let's see what else we have. The pinkish areas, these were what we looked at for salvage operations. Very small amount of area, but like I said, these are probably not going to be commercially viable anymore. So we're going to have to find a way to go in there and treat those larger diameter trees without somebody actually buying and taking them for us. And then this, what's going on in this rest of this area? Everything, fuels reduction of all types, whether it's prescribed fire in areas, whether it's mastication, whether it's hand piling and thinning. There's a lot of work to be done out there. And we realize there's a lot of area in that ground that's not going to get done, areas that are too steep to do anything. But we focus our areas, and Hinda will talk about why we kind of focused in these areas as well a little later, why we prioritize these areas. Other alternatives that are in the EA that we analyzed, the no action, of course, the proposed action. We analyzed another alternative that had limited use of herbicides only for the research plots and only for using invasives. The other alternative we analyzed was no use of herbicides anywhere. And then, of course, the proposed action with a 21-inch diameter limit. And that was kind of those graphs I showed earlier, was the basically comparison of the no action, the proposed action, and alternative 5, the 21-inch diameter limit. In designing this project and building this EA, we consulted with a lot of people, the water board, our federal partners, our local partners, our state partners, tribes, Firescape Mendocino, which is a large collaborative of multiple stakeholders, was actually kind of part of the ID team designing this project. They actually provided a lot of input, and a lot of expertise to help guide our ID team in the design of this project. So real quick, I'm probably going way over time here. Public input opportunities. We already did the scoping for the project. That was done in 2019. We had a great meeting in Lucerne at the Senior Center in May of 2019. We had the biggest turnout we ever had for a project-specific meeting. A lot of input from the public. We asked them, what would you like to see out here in this land? We gave them checklists of everything imaginable, but what they would like us to do out there. And we took those checklists and we looked at them, and we looked at the majority of what people wanted to do, and that guided our development of this project. This draft environmental analysis will go out for public comment sometime this month. There'll be a 45-day comment period. There's some emails there that you can jot down. Once that comment period starts, you can contact Gary Erdahl. He's my silviculturist, or myself with comments. There will be a press release as well as a legal notice when that goes out, letting people know when that comment period starts. And now I'm going to pass it off to Hinda, because she's got a 40,000 acre project once it's designed and signed off on that she needs to manage as our lead implementation officer as well.
Frank, did you want to take some time to answer any of the questions that came up during your presentation before we hand it off to Hinda?
I think we're pretty close to done, if you're okay with that. I know I went over my time. Maybe we'll hold those off to the end.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So that's that's my face, wondering what we're going to do with 40,000 acres of projects to implement. And I'll try to get through this a little bit quicker because I know we're a little behind. So our biggest thing was we said, we really need to prioritize. Wildland urban interface is definitely one of our high priority areas to focus on, as well as legacy forest elements. And we also like to call those green islands. And you'll see a little bit later why. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our keys to success, being strategic treatments and partnerships going into the future on how we're going to prioritize these areas. Frank, you can go ahead and go forward. I'm just waiting for the slide here.
It wasn't working there for a minute.
Okay, so you guys saw this map already, and we just pulled it up one more time to look. If you look on this, you can see the WUI, the wildland urban interface down there on the North Shores, hence the name of this project, Northshore, Nice, Lucerne, Clear Lake Oaks, and these treatments up here on top of the ridge line, and just really point to the communities down below and the treatments running where the cursors are. You can go ahead and move forward. And while we're waiting for this, oh, there it is. Okay. So besides WUI, which is the wildland urban interface, like I said, we also talked about the green islands, the legacy forest elements. And this is just an example from Google Earth, looking at some of the green that was left, and you look around the rest of the area and it's been burnt pretty well. And so we recognize that these areas are really, really important. It's going to be a very long time before we have any forests that look like anything that was left behind. And so that is a key area for us to go to. Go ahead. I think we're waiting for the slide to move forward. Taking a little time. Sorry, folks. It's still stuck. Okay. So right here on the left-hand side is an example of a green island that was left after the Forks Fire of 1996. Some folks here who've been around may remember that fire. And after that fire, these trees that have come down, you can see the burn scars on these trees. The trees that are standing are mostly green. There are some snags in there, but mostly green. And the trees that are on the forest floor came down after the 1996 fire. So it was after the 1996 fire, but before the ranch fire. We went out to the same plot. This was actually a plot taken inside one of our past project units that didn't get implemented before the fire. If you look on the right-hand side, we took the same photo after the ranch fire. So that's the reason why we focus in on a priority of these green islands is this is what happened to some of those islands in between two different fires, and we really don't want to see the rest of it disappear because we have even less of that green now. Go ahead and move forward. I think there's a little bit of a lag time. There we go. So now we're going to go in and just give a couple of examples of some treatments that we have done and that feed into the key strategy and how we go about doing our treatments. So this here is a project we've been working on for a couple of decades. On the left-hand side is a map. And if you look, hopefully you guys can see on the very left-hand side, there's a pinkish shaded in unit. And that's going to be in the next slide on the left-hand side of the road. And on the right-hand side of this map where the cursor is now are B, C, and D, and they're in red outlines, and that's going to be the right-hand side of the road. And this was called the Howard Mill Project up north, up Elk Mountain Road. And go ahead to the next one. And there it is. Okay. And so again, if you think back to the map, the middle, that's the road. On the left-hand side was that Unit A, the shaded in one. And on the right-hand side were the other units in the red outline. And what's really important to notice here is that on the left-hand side, we had steep slopes, and there wasn't a whole lot of treatment we could do in there besides prescribed burning. So we had been prescribed burning on that side. And then on the right-hand side, we had the Elk Mountain fuel break, which is 150 feet off the road, in addition to several hundred acres of thinning that had been done over the last probably 15 years or so. Not only did we thin in there multiple times, we did multiple entries of thinning, multiple entries of pile burning, multiple entries of understory burning. And when you go back there, these are pictures after the ranch fire. When you go back there, you can see that the fire was slowed down some by the prescribed burning we had done down below the road. And by the time it hit our treatment, you see it was still burning pretty hot, but it actually dropped down, and all the intensive treatment we had done up there on the left-hand side worked really well. And you know, it's very green on that side of the road. And so that's really key moving forward and how we strategize our projects. You can go ahead and go forward. And we're just waiting again. Okay. So this slide was just thrown in here to show that, you know, in the previous picture, there was a pretty wide road, and we did have a fuel break on one side, you know, so one might think, okay, that's what kept the green on the right-hand side, but this is actually just a couple miles up the road where all we had been able to do was some fuel break work on 150 feet on each side of this road. The road is the same width as in the previous example, but you can see the fire actually came in from the left-hand side. The fuel break did slow it down. You can see that there's, you know, almost no needles on the left-hand side from where it came. And on the right-hand side, there were needles at the time this picture was taken. But, you know, it slowed it down, but we weren't able to stop it there, and we lost most of the trees as well. You can see they're all dead there. Go ahead. Okay, and the next project I'm going to briefly touch on is the Lakeview Project. And we had quite a few units out there, and you can see the black line coming down. This is a Google Earth image, is the edge of the fire. The communities are down below on the left along the shoreline. That's Nice, Lucerne, and Clear Lake Oaks again. And the Lakeview Project was designed primarily to protect these communities from fire coming from inside the forest, and vice versa, to protect the forest from all the fire starts that happen in the communities. And we found that the projects that we had done, they were successful in changing fire behavior enough that it did aid us in stopping the fire there and successfully keeping the ranch fire out of the communities. However, all the treatments were not completely done. They were in different stages of implementation, and that's another key to remember. And you can go ahead and move forward, Frank. So with that, okay. So one thing I forgot to mention on the previous slide is it protected the communities, it changed fire behavior enough, but because the treatments weren't complete, it didn't change the fire behavior enough to keep our forest intact, or at least part of it. Most of it's burnt pretty well to the ground. So this one here is a treatment. We had commercially thinned it. We had then gone in and followed up with small diameter, which tends to be usually the less than 10-inch DBH trees. And we piled those. We burned the piles. We had not gone into the understory yet, but we had removed enough fuels that you can see there was some mixed severity. The one on the left, a little bit more brown. Probably some of the understory trees didn't make it. Picture on the right, probably most of the trees did make it. Go ahead to the next. And then here is a unit where we had gotten to the commercial thinning, which is also called logging. And we had hand thinned and we piled, but we had not gotten to burning all the piles in some of the areas. And where the piles were, it burned very hot, and every one of these trees are actually dead. And the biggest take home for this picture is that we create a lot of piles out there when it's not removed and taken somewhere. And our fire crews go up and we burn those piles, but we just can't keep up with all the burning. And so there were still piles out there when the ranch fire hit, and it burned very hot. And go ahead. And to summarize what I just talked about implementing, our key points are strategic intensive treatments, kind of like I talked about with the Howard Mill, where we had to spend that time. We spent decades of time going back in and re-thinning the area. When the shrubs would come back, we would pile burn it, and then we did several entries of understory burning, but it worked. Treatments need to be completed and they need to be maintained. Maintenance is typically in the understory burning. Much larger treatments are needed around high value resources. So again, we identify areas such as WUI or the legacy Green Islands, and we really spend our effort, time, and money in those areas. And also recognize that there's other areas where all we're going to do is do some understory burning, or there may even be areas that we want to let the forest just recover on its own for a while before we even put understory burning in there as well. So the right tool for the right place. Also wider fuel breaks. With the Northshore project, instead of going for a 300 foot, we're looking at 600 feet. Going back to just what we saw from the past, that we need something a little bit wider, and that having adjacent treatments to it is really important. Just the fuel breaks alone aren't really enough to alter the fire behavior, enough to save or keep parts of our forest green. And then treating drainages appropriately. I don't think we really talked about that much, but it is pretty important, and Frank can speak to that because he's taking over here for the next one. Sorry, I'm speaking fast. I'm trying to get us through because we're way past time.
Thanks, Hinda. Yeah, I think one of the key things is, we need to be so strategic because we can't treat all 40,000 acres, like you said, and we have so limited resources that we need to be able to prioritize and be strategic, and put our resources where they'll do the greatest good. Drainages. This is kind of like the egg on my face from the ranch fire. As I mentioned, I was a hydrologist when I came to the Mendocino Upper Lake District, and when we designed the Lakeview Project, we did not have a hydrologist on staff, so I was filling in as a planning officer, but also as a hydrologist. And what we typically do as hydrologists is we flag out these drainages, and we're not supposed to treat, we're supposed to treat lighter in the riparian reserves. We have our prescription for that, where it's supposed to be minimal management, and then we typically flag out some of these drainages and say, don't treat in here. Well, we had several units up in the Lakeview Project area where the treatments were all done and that unit did great, except for the drainages, where because I flagged them out, they weren't treated. And so the only areas that got toasted and burned were the drainages. So really, you got to take a look at them and not just leave them out. So yeah, that's my egg on my face. Let's see, we will just wrap up real quick with how our partnerships and funding. Fire Skip Mendocino, great collaborative. They've been helping us with public outreach. They conduct workshops. They actually supported us on the Lucerne scoping meeting for this project. Clear Lake Environmental Research Center. We've been partnering with them to chase some CAL FIRE grants. We got $800,000 or somewhere around there for fire prevention grant. That's just the Forest Service portion of it. Clerk got a lot more to do the hazard tree removal along the roads for ingress and egress. We had a great proposal for Forest Health grant. It did not get funded, but we're pretty sure we might eventually get that funded either directly or indirectly, and once CAL FIRE gets their budget straightened out. We've got the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, a great program that's going on with Lindsay Daly. It started with the New Paradigm College, this is we're building a tribal crew where we can train them to do ecosystem restoration work, share our knowledge back and forth from modern to traditional, and they're off to a great start. And I'll put a plug in right now that I believe in April 11th, April 8th, thanks Denise.
Thursday,
Lindsay
April 8th.
Daly will be here on the Sierra Club meeting to talk about the Terror Project. Scotts Valley Band of Pomo, they've got a biomass development project they want to do. They've been great partners. It was part of the Forest Health grant. We hope we'll get more funding for that. But they're sitting there waiting to take some of this small diameter wood off of our hill slopes, so we don't have to pile it and hope to burn it. Robinson Ranch and Rear, great partner. They've been involved in both the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance and in some of the grants. UCSF, we put in wood innovation grants with UCSF. The one did not get funded, but they're still a great partner. We're continuing to look for funding with them. This is anything from biomass development to baling machines to take the biomass off the forest. National NRCS, Lake County, we put in a Joint Chiefs proposal last year. We were 1 point short of getting funded. The Forest Service keeps pushing us to put it in again. We probably will this year. And what that'll do is allow us to treat across boundaries into a lot of those private inholdings that you saw in that project area. Chad Roberts, conservation ecologist, he and Bob Schneider were part of Fire Escape Mendocino core team. Bob still is part of the Fire Escape core team, but both Chad and Bob providing a lot of great input into the development of this project. Pacific Northwest Research Station, they're doing some of the research on this project. Region 5 Ecology, like I said, they provided that regeneration probability map. And then, like I said, a lot of schools and tribes have been asking of us how they can help us, restore the forest and the ecosystem up there in the Northshore area. I know we're running out of time. Morris Johnson with Pacific Northwest Research. Basically, these, I won't read them. These are kind of some of the general questions he's looking at in the research plots in this project. And it's basically, there's a lot of controversy in the scientific literature about the effects of salvage logging on different forest structure and development. And so it's none of this has been done here on the southern end of the Mendocino, which is a really important part of our ecosystem. It's in a transition zone with climate change. So he is on board trying to do some research with us. Unfortunately, it was somewhat dependent on a salvage operation, but we're still going to pursue funding to basically mimic that salvage operation. We're going to have to pay for it somehow. We're not going to be able to get the mills to pay for it anymore, but we're still going to pursue that. UC Davis, not UC Dave. We've got a master's student that was interested in doing what's called the land facet analysis to help provide us another tool of what we should plant where, accounting for climate change and bioconnectivity. It got put off because of COVID. He was supposed to start his research that summer, this last summer. trying to get back in touch, see if he's still interested. I believe he still is. And then UC Davis partnering with Tohoku University in Japan even. This is a picture of our visitors from Japan coming in. They want to look at a comparative watershed study between some of their burned watersheds in Japan and the burned watersheds over here in the Clear Lake Basin. Just got contacted by them just the other day. It was put off again because of COVID and travel restrictions, but they're still interested in joining us in this endeavor. So great research opportunities happening in this project area. And that's it. We probably went way over our time. This was supposed to be a 45-minute presentation, and I talked too much.
Well, we do have a few questions.
So entertain questions.
Joanne, would you like to just bring forward the questions that anybody who has on Zoom who wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand by hitting the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raising your hand, and we'll, in fact, I'll leave it to Joanne to maybe allow anybody to unmute their own mics. But we do have a few questions that have come up. Deb Sally asked, doesn't the natural recovery start with brush? Why is it necessary to stifle its growth? And is the herbicide applied across the entire landscape or in patches?
It is, and you can say, once you have a barren landscape, it goes from brush and eventually comes back maybe into a forest. But there's a large area of the forest out there that we are never going to be able to treat. Particularly in that project area, you'll notice where we focus those treatments. And the reason why we might want to reforest those areas and knock down the brush is because in the future, the next fire, and it will happen. The Forks fire happened 20 years ago. This fire happened in 2018. The next fire is going to happen. And at least in that wildland urban interface, and that's where we're really focused with knocking down some of the brush. It's a lot easier to suppress and manage fire away from those communities when you're talking about a forested, open forest environment rather than a brush stand or shrubland. It's just, that's why, one of the reasons why that is the focus. It's in that wildland urban interface. If you notice, there was nothing else being proposed out in the other 40,000 acres except trying to get rid of some of the fuel loading because we'll try and get rid of some of the fuel loading, but much of that is just going to be natural succession. But we really need to focus on that wildland urban interface and how that might be managed in the future.
And just as a follow-up to that question, can you also speak to how the seedlings and the wildlife, the relationship between the brush and then protecting those seedlings and wildlife as they try to regenerate?
Well, if we're looking for an area, as I mentioned, where we really want an open forest stand, we want to try and get the trees to grow above the brush. And it could be herbicides, it could be other, we're looking at other ways of doing it, planting at a larger spacing where we can actually get equipment in there to masticate. Those of you who don't know, masticate is basically a giant mower that handles trees and shrubs instead of grass. Masticate in between those seedlings instead of having to use herbicides. I don't know if that answered your question, Denise. I'm not exactly sure what you were getting at, but you're on mute.
Sorry, there's a follow-up to the question on the herbicides that was in the chat here. And I think the concern behind the question is, does brush help the seedlings or hurt the seedlings and wildlife as they try to come back? So it sounds like you're trying to strike that balance.
It is a balance, yeah. I mean, everything has, a benefit. Brush is great habitat for birds. A mix between conifers and brush is a great habitat for deer. But you need to strike that balance between providing habitat and providing protection for communities, and also trying to develop a little bit
forested habitat for those species that really want to have, a forested environment. Those green islands that we talk about, if there's going to be any NSO habitat here in the future, those are going to be the bigger, older trees that are going to provide it as soon as possible. So those are the areas we want to maybe protect from brush growing up along them, because if the next fire comes through, they might wipe out those green islands. And, so it's a big balance. And I think that the project is designed to strike that balance as best as we know we can right now.
Another question in chat. This comes from Deb Sally. What was and I'm not sure I understand the question actually, but what is the amount of tons per acre that was considered optimal for wildlife and ecosystems recovery? Tons per acre. I'm assuming that's a fuel, or maybe Deb could unmute herself and ask the question.
Yeah, that was in the graph where you were looking at what was the amount of fuel reduction that you wanted to do to decrease the hazard. And you said something about a compromise between fire and the wildlife and ecosystems, but I didn't know if you said anything about what the amount of tons per acre was considered optimal for wildlife.
Right.
I'll see if Hinda, you want to grab that. I mean, basically, there is a report out there that shows what the optimal tons per acre is for soils, for fuel reduction, for fire protection, for wildlife. When you try to strike that balance, and it's a GTR, I don't know if Hinda, you have it in front of you if you want to comment. When you try to strike that balance between all that is right around 25 tons per acre, I think, right, Hinda?
Yeah, that's correct. It's actually it's a paper, a GTR paper, and it's referenced. It'll be in the EA and it's in some of the reports, but I don't have exactly the number on me right now. But if anyone wants it, I can certainly provide it.
Okay, and I'm seeing a lot of chat, but so I would encourage both Hinda and Frank to peruse some of the facts brought forth in the chat. There's another question here, though, from Betsy Kahn. Is there any consideration given to planting non-native species that might be more adaptable to the vulnerable climate change area? More adaptable, I guess, to the changes in climate.
That's a good question, Betsy. That was discussed, particularly, amongst like our silviculturist Gary and Chad Roberts and folks in our Region 5 ecology team, and wasn't really considered because at least our direction, our land management plan does not allow for type conversions. We can't transplant species like that. And so it's just not, based on our land management plan, we just can't do it. And we believe in this area anyway, that we still got a viable project as far as, where the trees might be able to grow in climate change. And we're not going to be there's probably a lot of areas that had trees that we're not even going to try to plant trees in, and most likely will not come back with trees. It'll come back with shrubs and grass oaklands. But we cannot actually go ahead and actively transplant invasive species into an area, whether we think it's going to be the natural succession or not. It's just not in our land management plan to do.
Question from either Will or Trisha. I'm assuming Trisha. Is there a ballpark cost estimate for the Northshore project?
Ooh. That's a lot. I mean, like I said, there's 40,000. It's a 40,000 acre project. Most of that is, a lot of it's not going to get treated because it's too steep. And if we wanted to treat it, it's going to be 3 times as much to treat. We're covering it in a NEPA in case, who knows, 5 years, 10 years from now, there may be a different technology out there that we can utilize to do something in some of those areas. But ballpark estimate for a project, I mean, help me out here, Hinda. We're looking at probably $1,100 to $12,000 per acre. $1,100 to $1,200 per acre just for a thinning contract. Multiply that over 40,000 acres or whatever that might be. It's a huge price tag, and it's going to be a long time. And that's why it's really important that we have all these partners here to try and help us raise money. And it's why it's so important to do the prioritization and strategic treatments that Hinda talked about. Do you have anything to add there, Hinda?
No, I think you got it. I mean, even considering where we don't, we're not going to be thinning every acre of that 40,000 acres. Prescribed burning comes with a cost as well. So, and then the 1,100, 11 to 1,200 per acre. It's probably going to be more where we're left with the larger trees that typically we would, get out of the forest with a salvage logging operation. If that doesn't happen, those are very expensive units to go in and for us to pay to treat. So yeah, it'll be a lot of money, but
Joanna, are there any other questions that you're seeing from Facebook or hands raised?
I am not, neither Facebook nor in the Zoom room.
Okay. Well, with that then, I do want to let folks know that we have another general membership meeting on April 8th. And in that meeting, we've invited Lindsay Daly, who's now the executive director of Tribal Ecosystem Restoration Project. Lindsay's been working with Frank and Hinda and Rebecca Wong and others that are on this call to develop this restoration project with the tribes. And their approach is really to help nature accelerate its recovery as best that we can. So it'll be an interesting talk, kind of one level deeper on the nature of the work as it involves ecosystem restoration from a human scale perspective. So, and she'll also have ways that you can get involved if you want to get involved in their project. So Frank and Hinda, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I don't think I do. Just, yeah, thank you everyone for the opportunity, and we're always reachable for, further questions or input or any of that stuff. I'm always willing to talk.
Yeah, it's really informative and at some level heartbreaking at what the scale of this is. But it's also encouraging that the work that's being done is strategic. So it gives us at least as much leverage as we can have in bringing this forest back. So thank you again for the talk, and I hope you join us on April 8th as well. See what Lindsay has to say.
Yes, thank you very much. That was very interesting and informative.
All right. So with that, Joanne, you want to just unmute and have folks, anybody who wants to say goodbye or give a shout out, they can.
Sounds good. Feel free to unmute yourself and give thanks and appreciate the presentations.
I'll clap.
Well, I appreciate
Zoom clap.
everybody's attendance and the opportunity to display what I think our district, my district, our forest is doing great things with folks like Hinda and Gary and our partners that have joined us, on this. So really appreciate the opportunity to share all that with you.
Well, thank you for that.
This is Betsy Kahn.
Hi, Betsy.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Denise. Hi, everybody. I just want to mention that tomorrow afternoon, the Lake County Risk Reduction Authority will be having a retreat. to review its mission and set some priorities for the programs that it will be sponsoring and supporting, of course, including all the work that you guys are doing and Clerk is doing and Harry is doing at the Resource Conservation District and New Paradigm College is doing. I mean, this is really an amazing period of time to be alive, in my opinion, when I can see all the efforts coming together like this. And so I encourage people to participate tomorrow afternoon. It's certainly a Brown Act governed meeting. Everybody is welcome. And I think it'll be really, we're going to look forward, I'm looking forward to 2020. Thanks an awful lot, Sierra Club and Frank and Hinda and everybody, you know, very nice. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks.
How can people get involved in that meeting? How do they get there?
So if you want to, you'll have to request the agenda and the links from Carolyn Purdy, that's CAROLYN.PURDY at lakecountyca.gov, the county administration. I just looked today on the Risk Reduction Authority website the county puts up, but the agenda and the link is not provided on that website as of this evening. It might be tomorrow. I'll ask her to do that. But in the meantime, you can just ask her. She'll send you the email. It has the link and all that kind of stuff on the agenda. Yeah.
All right.
Starts at 12:30. So
Thanks
plenty
for
of
the
time.
heads up. Thank you. All right. All right. Any other shout out to or announcements that folks would like to make?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make one. We'll be offering a proclamation to the Board of Supervisors. It's about promoting tolerance, respect, equity, and inclusion in Lake County. And we'll be doing that on February 23rd at around 9 a.m. in the Board of Supervisors chambers. I'm not sure where I'm going to post the proclamation, but I think I'll be sending out a press release with the details about that in the next week or so.
Thanks, Joanne. Anyone else? I'll tell you what, Zoom etiquette has gotten so much better. People have learned.
Well,
this is-
thanks, everyone.
This is from Ellen. Thank you. I just joined late, but I appreciate what I did here, and I'll try to read or listen to the recording so I can hear the rest of it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it'll be up on our Facebook page. You'll be able to watch it at your own convenience.
Thank you.
Super. All right. Well, thanks
Keep an eye
again.
out for that EA and that press release. All comments are going to be welcome, of course. And you know, the more comments we get, the more input we get, the better project we're going to develop. So keep an eye out for it.
Super.
Great.
Well, thanks for your good work, Frank and Hinda, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you in April as well, April 8th.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
And for those of you just
Bye,
joining,
everyone.
we apologize that we're just ending the meeting here. So,
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.
and
All
Denise,
right.
if you could hang for just a minute, that would be great. And maybe stop the recording.
I just did.
Okay, great. Thank you. See how everybody else goes here. Sorry, we had somebody join quite late too, so. There we go.
I think you guys did a great job of running that meeting. And
Oh, I'm going to go ahead and can we undo the live on Facebook? Do I have that here?